Hello everyone, this is part 7 of What If Deku Was the Chainsaw Man, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist. To see more, comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. A silken surface brushes against Izuku's fingertips. Starting with his thumb and pinky, all 5 digits fold and his hand grasps at an empty space. Still somnolent, the boy sluggishly stirs in his bed with a groggy groan before reaching for the spot beside him again. Izuku's hand passes through her hair a second time before slapping the sheets. Though soft, there isn't the usual fuzz that he's familiar with. His eyes blink open, and though bleary, he has a visual confirmation. Pokita is missing. Izuku springs up straight, his mattress straining under the sudden movement. The fogginess clears from his head and his eyes. Now fully awake, the boy scours the room with his gaze for his dog, double-checking his bed. When he doesn't catch even a glimpse of orange, he tosses the All Might-themed blankets that cover him onto the floor and darts from his bed. He fumbles with the doorknob only momentarily before throwing it open and sprinting down the hall. Mom! Mom! Izuku calls for his mother as he stumbles over his own stubby legs. He finds Inko in the kitchen cooking breakfast for him. She greets him with a smile, but the expression quickly evaporates when she sees the face her son is making. Pokita is missing. Izuku explains his state of panic before she can even ask. Inko glances over her son's shoulder, half expecting the dog to be there despite his exclamation. When her eyes shift back downwards and land on Izuku's watery ones, she bends down to console him. Oh dear, let's not panic. I'm sure he didn't go very far. She tries soothing him by running a hand through his green curls, but the young boy is already sniffling. Do you think he ran away? What if a villain got him? There's no holding back the waterworks and Inko has to hold him close so that he can dry his tears on her apron. She shushes him assuredly and rocks him side to side like she would when he was an infant to calm him down. When his whines revert back to snivels, she lets him have some space to breathe. Pokita loves you too much to run away and he's got the chainsaw of his to fend off villains. Inko's words must do the trick since Izuku nods along with that line of reasoning. She stands up to grab the phone off the wall and dials Mitsuki's number. I'll ask the neighbors if they saw anything and we'll walk around to see if he wandered off. Inko already starts formulating a plan to find the family pet and prevent a relapse of her son's sobbing. We can then print flyers if Pokita still doesn't turn up. Oh okay. Izuku wipes away the tears streaming down his freckled cheeks before puffing them up and getting a determined glint in his glossy gaze. I'll get us started then. Before Inko can even respond, he's flying into the backyard to begin his search. Shut the fuck up, brat. Inko jumps when the line clicks and she hears Mitsuki screaming at the top of her lungs. Faintly, Katsuki shouts something back that doesn't quite reach the phone. You're lucky I didn't get an abortion. The yelling match continues for a bit before Mitsuki suddenly switches her tone to be as polite as possible. Hi Inko. I saw your caller ID. How's Izuku? Inko sweet drops before wiping the side of her forehead with the back of her hand. He's doing well. Sorta. There's a pause in her speech pattern when the boy hurriedly flies past her to search the living room. You haven't happened to see Pokita around, have you? That stray you took in? Can't say I have. There's a rustle of movement before Mitsuki adds, let me ask Masaru and Katsuki. Inko patiently waits as she listens to the short interaction between wife and husband before wincing when it comes to the son's turn. Oi, shithead. Have you seen Izuku's mutt? Mitsuki and Katsuki exchange some rude words before she shifts back to Inko and says, sorry but it doesn't look like anyone saw him. That's fine. Izuku and I are going to have a look around the neighborhood but please let us know if Pokita turns up at your house somehow. Inko sighs and shakes her head when Izuku pops his head in to check for an update on the phone call. Izuku pouts a little but doesn't cry. He goes back to searching the house. Of course, Inko. We'll be on the lookout. Mitsuki's assurance puts a small smile on Inko's face before she hangs up the phone. Though just a glimmer, there's some hope that her friend can help. She repeats that rise and fall of faith with each phone call that she makes after that. Nobody saw him. Izuku squeaks with disappointment when his mother reports the progress she made. Tears threaten to spill again, but he holds them back as best as he can. He's a small dog. That makes him easy to go unnoticed. Inko does her best to rationalize the situation for her son while making sure that she has all the right contents she needs in her purse in order to go out, but now everyone knows to keep an eye out. Izuku remembers the time that his mom dressed up as a pirate for Halloween and let him try on her eye patch. Without both of his eyes, Pokita was very difficult to keep track of. The small dog would weave between his legs and trip him up. Comparing that memory with now, he can understand her reasoning. And plus we're gonna look for him, he adds. That's right, Inko nods with a smile. She slides her arms into the sleeves of her coat before helping Izuku with his. I'm sure he'll come running if he hears us calling his name. Except, that doesn't happen. The two search the entire neighborhood for the whole day, retracing their steps a few times just to be sure. They call Pokita's name, but he doesn't come running like Inko thought he would. Izuku becomes discouraged and starts sobbing. Eventually, he cries himself out and Inko has to carry him home. When she lays Izuku down in his bed, he absent-mindedly grasps at the air during his slumber. Inko realizes that her son is reaching for his lost dog and has to fight back her own tears. My poor boy, she contemplates giving him a pillow to fill the void but knows that he'd probably notice the difference and wake up. All she can do for him is let him sleep and hope that Pokita turns up in the morning. Suddenly, Inko hears a whimper. For a moment, she worries that it's her son. But then she feels something soft brushing against her ankles and looks down. There, crawling out from underneath the bed, is Pokita. The short dog's eyes wobble and she can tell that the animal has been crying too. This whole time, Pokita was at home hiding and waiting for them to get back. You goofballs, Inko chokes back a laugh. She helps the dog up onto the bed so that it can curl up with her son. The boy and his pet worried one another sick over nothing. What am I gonna do with you two? She keeps her voice low to a whisper so that she doesn't wake him up. The two cuddle and Izuku's face forms a smile when he's able to wrap his arms around Pokita. The rapid beating of Izuku's panicked heart settles into a mellow tune when he feels Pokita's warmth against his chest. Another flurry of coughs, thick and fast as the previous fits had been, completely rack the thin frame of All Might's deflated form. He holds a napkin to his mouth, catching splatters of blood to keep it from spewing out uncontrollably. Despite the involuntary wince, Izuku can't help but continue to marvel at his idol anyways. The hero otaku silently mouths, "Oh. He's just like me, for real." All Might is too busy dabbing residual specks of blood from his lips to notice, only looking up after he's pocketed the sullied tissue. My apologies, young man. As I was saying, this true form of mine is significantly weaker than the one that you and the general public are used to seeing. He shifts uncomfortably from his position in the armrest across from Izuku before clearing his throat and continuing, because of how vulnerable I am in this weakened state, you can imagine why this is such a closely guarded secret, not just for my own benefit but so that the public doesn't panic. Izuku numbly nods, still on autopilot since they were evacuated from the USJ. After medical examiners looked him over, he'd been given a blood transplant in order to recuperate. And now, during the meantime while he waits for his mother to come pick him up, All Might whisks him away for a private conversation in the teacher's lounge to avoid prying eyes or ears. How did you get like this? Or were you always? Izuku lets the question linger in the air once he realizes he might have accidentally insulted his hero. The blonde responds with a solemn smile before lifting the hem of his shirt to reveal a gnarly cicatrix. The scarring is so severe that it still appears to be bruised, the spider web of color spiraling towards a more gruesome mark of injury. I received this 5 years ago in the toughest battle I ever had with a villain. Izuku feels his stomach drop as though the wound is his own. My respiratory system is in shambles and several surgery operations only allows me a minimum of 3 hours a day to perform hero work. 5 years ago, Izuku swallows a lump in his throat but another one forms right behind it when he remembers which villains All Might fought during that time period. Did Toxic Chainsaw do that to you? The boy pales at the thought. After years of ridicule, of having his absent father's identity brought into question and accused of being that fiend, he can't help but feel guilty for some reason. Izuku is relieved when All Might chuckles and shakes his head. Toxic Chainsaw could hardly manage this, but you know your hero trivia well. The blonde lowers his shirt back down, covering the massive scar. The villain that I'm referring to is much worse, so much worse that I made certain the public would never know of his existence, only dwellers of the underworld would hear whispers. Izuku leans back in disbelief, his body sinking into the cushion of his own armchair. He can't possibly imagine a villain so powerful, one at the same level of All Might, one capable of inflicting such damage. Why you defeated him though? Right, Izuku breathlessly asks. All Might offers an assuring smile, but it wavers ever so slightly when he answers, nobody will ever be put in danger by that monster ever again. The hero's gaze falls to his thin fingers that curl over to form a fist. I made sure of it. Izuku's eyes widen when he ponders the implications of that answer. But he nods in understanding once the initial shock fades away. It's not actually all that surprising once he thinks about it. The boy finds himself staring at his own hands. The hands that sprout chainsaws. He recalls 13's speech about the power of quirks and raises his head to ask, did you kill him? All Might's mouth droops, no longer holding a smile. We never found a body. Izuku shudders at the implication of that, but I caved his face in the last I saw it, and he finds himself torn between gawking or tightening his jaw when he learns more. All his life, Izuku had made up in his mind a perfect image of the hero in front of him. He had idolized All Might his entire youth, somehow having not once considered the symbol of peace anything other than a symbol. Now though, the boy can see the strained wrinkles edging the corners of the man's mouth, and he knows that the broad smile All Might usually flashes is phony. The man is just a man. He's human. Izuku's hand finds itself over his heart, fingers brushing against the string attached to his sternum beneath the fabric of his shirt. Without Pokita, he'd have been just as human. I can tell from your expression that there's something on your mind. All Might's voice cuts through the boy's thoughts. Startled, Izuku sits up straighter. I'm sorry, sensei, it's just. Izuku wets his lips as he carefully chooses his words. I used to be quirkless. And it's All Might's posture that stiffens next. Izuku's face scrunches up as he shifts his gaze to the floor. And I'm somehow only now realizing people are more than just what their quirks make them to be. A moment of silence passes between them, All Might nodding despite the boy's eyes being set elsewhere. It's hard for people to not be influenced by their quirks, especially when certain kinds are classified or categorized in one particular group or the other, but it's important for us to remember all quirks are dangerous. All Might leans forward like he's sharing a secret, but his voice is hardly a whisper even if it's not as boisterous as when he speaks when in his muscle form. Izuku closes his eyes, visualizing in his mind the scene where he had always been bullied. Kaken and his cronies would drag him under the overpass of the canal in Musutafu, when they'd say his quirk makes him a villain. Izuku's eyes snap open, seeking All Might desperately as he inquires, but the reason UK killed that villain was because his quirk was too dangerous to keep him around, right? The man blinks, breaking the eye contact. Slowly, he somehow deflates even further after hearing that question. All Might leans back and closes his eyes, releasing a somber sigh. Then, his tone switches to something Izuku had never heard All Might sound like. He was called All for One. The words carry a heavy weight to them. Izuku's mouth twitches, facial muscles forcibly willing him to repeat in a hushed whisper, All for One. He shudders while testing the name on his tongue. Every syllable stings with a bitter taste. Because he would take people's quirks all for himself, All Might's explanation leaves an after flavor in the boy's mouth that makes him worry about vomiting, the ability to take quirks. I shouldn't say there is such a thing as a villain's quirk, young Midoriya, just that a quirk can become villainous should it belong to someone villainous. The usually righteous blue eyes of the number one hero suddenly hold a very dark gaze, and that man. Izuku is forced to look away again, unable to meet the stare. He fidgets, feeling as though the glare is directed at him. So you're saying that a quirk can be given to the wrong person, that it's not the quirk itself that's bad. When All Might doesn't respond right away, Izuku chances a peek at the hero. The blonde appears pensive but settles on an answer, I suppose that is what I'm saying. Before Izuku can dwell on that response for even a second, All Might clears his throat and continues, speaking of which, this whole thing about giving a quirk to the right or wrong person. Well, I wanted to share with you another big secret. Izuku blinks back his surprise, shocked to hear that there's somehow more to know about his idol. He certainly doesn't expect. I was quirkless once too, young Midoriya. You. Izuku's eyes nearly pop out of his skull. No way. Yes, All Might's small smile matches his humored tone, but that quickly dissipates when he begins to elaborate. The origin of my quirk is actually related to All for One, a quirk passed down to fight him for generations that accumulates strength with each user. A stockpiling quirk, Izuku finds himself absent-mindedly filling in the blanks but quickly clamps his mouth shut when he realizes he accidentally interrupted All Might. That's right, though the hero doesn't seem to mind. He scratches at the disheveled hair atop his head before saying, "And my time is coming to an end. Soon, I will need to find my successor." Izuku falls back in his seat, feeling struck. All Might's end isn't something he ever conceived possible, let alone the symbol of peace searching for a successor. That's why you started teaching at UA. He finds himself filling in more blanks the more that he thinks about it. I wanted to see the next generation of heroes for myself and make a decision depending on who is worthy. All Might slowly raises his hand up. Izuku is surprised to find a finger attached at the end of that hand, and that finger is pointed at him. "Young Midoriya, I believe you have what it takes to receive my quirk." Me. Izuku's eyes almost burst this time. He rubs at them, mistaking them for his ears as he wonders if he's hearing things correctly. All Might chuckles, amused by the reaction. "Well, you've proven yourself to be quite." No, but Izuku has tears in his eyes that keep coming no matter how much he tries to wipe them away. No. All Might leans forward in his seat and then back as he tries to decide how to properly respond to the situation. His frail fingers fidget as he ponders whether or not he should comfort Izuku with a hug. But first, he waits for an explanation. Izuku croaks out a weak noise as his voice dies in his throat. When he recovers, he speaks with a trembling whisper, "Remember when I said I was quirkless?" Yes, you. All Might's sunken eyes broaden the depth of their pits when he tries to come to a conclusion on his own. Did you receive your quirk? Not from him, but Izuku is quick to debunk the man's theory. The boy's body shakes as he tries to get himself under control. Izuku finds his hands placing themselves against his chest to feel the thrumming of his heart. This quirk. It came from my dog, believe it or not. The tail attached to his sternum touches the tips of his fingers. I already feel like I did nothing to deserve this one, and now. How could I take another? Izuku raises his head so that his watery gaze can find All Might's blue orbs. The hero hums as he considers Izuku's story. He then leans forward, reaching out to place a hand on the boy's shoulder. It seems to me your dog saw the same thing that I see in you. All Might gives Izuku a soft squeeze of assurement, but I understand why you're so hesitant. When the hero's hand slips away, Izuku can still feel the warmth radiating off his idol's touch. I'm sorry that I sprung such a big decision on you so suddenly. That was inconsiderate of me. And no, I mean, don't apologize. I think you should still consider the others in my class. Izuku shows that he's ashamed with an apologetic bow for denying his idol's offer nevertheless. Before All Might can tell Izuku to raise his head, the door to the lounge swings open and another one of the UA students' teachers enters. Am I interrupting something? Aizawa raises a brow as he takes in the scene with tired eyes. Izuku finds himself impulsively staring at the layer of stitches holding together the fresh scar across his teacher's cheek. The Nomu at the USJ had torn open Aizawa's mouth, leaving a lasting mark on the underground hero's face. Aizawa's gaze flicks towards Izuku, making the boy jump in his seat. Quickly, Izuku looks away. He hopes he didn't come across as impolite. Not at all. Actually, we were just finishing our conversation. Luckily, All Might saves him by drawing Aizawa's attention with a gesture. I'm sure young Midoriya's mother is here by now. Izuku stands up, taking his other teacher's cue. Although, he adds for extra measure to make up for staring, it's good to see you back on your feet again, sensei. Aizawa makes a noise that sounds like a cross between a scoff and a huff, but still gives his student an appreciative nod. Don't keep your mother waiting, Midoriya. He steps aside for the boy to pass but doesn't forget to add, and remember that you'll be joining Class B tomorrow, so be sure to speak with Vlad. He'll be your temporary homeroom teacher for that day. Izuku bites back his instinctual reaction of shock that classes will still carry on per usual despite the villain attack, instead responding with a forced smile and a nod. Yes, sensei. He had been hoping to postpone the inevitable. While he does manage to get away from his usual classmates tomorrow, he recalls the way Shiozaki reacted. As Izuku walks down the long corridor of UA, he can't help but dread what the other hero students of Class 1B will have to say about his quirk now that his secret is out. It's a letter, covered by copious crease lines from having been folded and unfolded, all of them fluffy to the outside. The envelope, however, had arrived in pristine condition. A red dot of sealing wax with the UA logo punctuated by melted curves had made it appear as though it traveled through a steam press rather than by the hand transference of teacher to student. A thin piece of paper is soft to the touch in Izuku's trembling hand, the handwriting done with black ink having run through the singular page. The boy's eyes roam the strokes of the pen markings, narrowed to a squint as they take in the strong lines and heavy marks. Aizawa had informed the hero in training that one of his peers had wanted the message delivered upon dropping out of the hero course. His sensei had tried saying the USJ was the causality of the hero potential quitting, but a personalized note addressed to Izuku tells the boy otherwise. He had expected some sort of backlash reaction from his classmates, and this is just the starting opinion of one, but Izuku still feels overwhelmed by the reality of the situation. His eyelids will themselves closed, but he forces them to reopen so that he can read the letter. Can you grow a chainsaw from your dick, Minoru Mineta? Izuku's hand folds over the piece of paper, crumbling it into a ball that fits within the confinement of his tight fist. His tremors of anxiety shift to angry shakes and he grits his teeth to keep from yelling. Instead, a bitter laugh comes out. Whether the question was sincere or it was meant to be some sort of crude comment as a bullying parting shot, Izuku shakes it off with a shake of his head. His usual class aside, he still has to face an entirely separate hero course, and they're more up close and personal than a note. He shoves the paperweight into his blazer pocket before steeling himself to walk through the door of Class 1B. A blonde blur clears the distance between the classroom entrance and the collection of desks residing within, the source of that brisk movement stopping short a nose width apart from Izuku. He tries not to flinch but fails to keep himself from taking a step back. A boy with a broad grin and his hair slicked so that it's parted to the side further intrudes on Izuku's personal space before shouting, "Well, if it isn't another pompous member of 1A. I sure do hope your personality isn't as explosive as the last fill-in." Izuku blinks, his mind registering that the boy is talking about Katsuki. Within that split-second span of time it takes for his eyes to reopen, there are suddenly more members of 1B filing in behind the blonde. One of which is a girl with her orange hair tied into a ponytail. She has noticeably massive hands that she uses to karate chop the blonde into submission. Izuku winces, feeling a phantom pain in his neck just from witnessing the move. Sorry about Monoma, she shares a matching expression to Izuku's, though hers is likely more from second-hand embarrassment because of her classmate. When her hands shrink to an average size so that she can hold one out for a handshake, the girl introduces herself, "I'm Itsuka Kendo. It'll be a pleasure having you join our class for the day." Kendo pauses before adding, "Though I do hope you've got more of a filter than our last guest." At that, Izuku can't help but chuckle. Katsuki certainly made an impression on the class. Then again, he makes his personality one that's hard to forget. Bakugo is a rare breed from me and the rest of my class, so don't worry about that. Though Izuku absent-mindedly fiddles with the paperweight in his blazer pocket when he recalls Mineta's unfiltered version of profanity. He ceases his anxiety when he remembers the small pervert quit the hero course. A girl with green hair darker than Izuku's and pointed teeth like Kirishima's straightens her posture and flashes her fangs with a grin. "Oh, I dunno about that, you two seem to be keeping the stud standards the same." She places a hand on her hip while jutting it out provocatively and flips her hair just as flirtatiously. Izuku curses himself internally when he falls for the teasing, his body betraying him when he flushes red in embarrassment. Kendo gives the girl the same karate chop treatment as the boy named Monoma. "Leave the poor boy alone, Setsuna. Can't you see you're making him uncomfortable?" Shooting Izuku another apologetic expression on behalf of the class. A boy who matches Kirishima in more ways than one pushes past the two girls, flashing shark-tipped teeth while thrusting a thumb at himself. Name's Tetsu. His name is just as baffling as the rest of his greeting when he too invades Izuku's personal space to ask, "Is it true that your quirk gives you chainsaws on your arms?" Izuku shrinks in on himself, giving a meek nod as he braces for what he momentarily forgot about. The initial welcome of the class had lowered his guard and now he has to prepare to pay the price. That's so metal, he isn't expecting the enthusiastic clash of Tetsu's own fists turned to steel. Izuku blanches, further surprised by the similarities between Kirishima and Tetsu. Still shaken, his body literally trembling, Izuku has to clasp each of his hands together to keep them from quivering. He wrings them together as though he's trying to bleed out his anxiety until he's able to force himself to make eye contact. You're not. Freaked out, Izuku can't help but shift his gaze to glance at the 1B girl with vines on her head. Well, his eyes are drawn in the direction of a boy whose pale skin pigmentation coupled with his unique facial features makes him appear as though his head is a skull. Shiozaki described your quirk in a pretty. The boy pauses as he mulls over the right terminology to continue with. Colorful way, but. Midoriya. Shiozaki's interjection makes Izuku jump in place, but he recovers quickly. He faces the girl as she approaches him, mustering up as much fake confidence as he can. Yes, Shiozaki. Izuku forces his mouth to form some semblance of a smile and tries to keep his wobbly tone as polite as possible. His fabricated facial expression falls flat when Shiozaki surprises him by bending down at the waist. I would like to apologize for the way I treated you because of your quirk. She starts with a sincere statement before placing her hands over her heart and raising her head ever so slightly to look up at Izuku. My behavior was unacceptable and I'm ashamed that it took my return to my class to remember we are all the Lord's children. Izuku tries not to gawk too much when she lowers her head again and repeats herself, please forgive me. He notices across the room a few hero students with mutation quirks who watch the entire interaction with keen interest. He wonders if they had a frank discussion with her to lead to this change of opinion. Of course I forgive you, Shiozaki. Izuku accepts her apology regardless. He gives her a smile, a genuine one this time, to show he doesn't hold a grudge. It's okay, really, lots of people react that way. Actually, I think you took it better than most people do. He even goes as far as trying to make her feel better by comparing previous ridicules. However, when he sees everyone staring at him with wide eyes, he realizes that his comment had the opposite effect. He forces a chuckle that only sounds awkward while trying to smooth over his mistake. Nothing I haven't heard before. I mean, I heard worse. Dude, that is not okay. Tetsu shakes his head while giving Izuku a look of pity. Even the blonde boy named Monoma shares a similar look from his spot on the floor upon recovery. Midoriya, I must apologize again. Shiozaki bows a second time. I didn't realize you had received such harsh mistreatment prior to my own, only further worsening my scrutiny. But Izuku frantically waves his hands in a gesture for her to stop. No. Really. It's fine. Water under the bridge. Seeing the tail end of that interaction, Monoma forces himself up from one knee and begins brushing himself off. Good. I'm glad that's behind us, though he has to duck down to avoid a repeat of his collapse from a kendo karate chop, because we have much more pressing matters. Here he goes again. A boy with a headband keeping his hair pointed up rolls his eyes at his classmates' antics. We made a pact with the other courses to see what we're dealing with. We can't back out now. Monoma tries and fails to keep the whine out of his voice while desperately attempting to convince his class to play along. What are you talking about? And Izuku can't help but raise a brow upon having his own interest piqued. Kendo releases a deep-rooted sigh before explaining, with the sports festival approaching, a bunch of people thought it'd be a good idea to visit 1A's homeroom to see what all the fuss was about after the USJ. She frowns and threatens Monoma with a raised hand once she finishes with Izuku, which we are not doing. She stops when Tetsu feigns a cough into his own hand. That same hand reaches around his head to scratch at his nape while he awkwardly explains why he's siding with Monoma. Actually, I do kinda wanna see what the competition is like. Monoma's face flashes with relief before settling into a grin. See. That's one in favor. Everyone else. A few mumbles increase before becoming a chorus of commotion, almost indistinguishable and unintelligible, but they all seem to be a form of agreement at the very least. Fine. Fine. Kendo eventually caves and accepts the majority opinion of the class. But everyone be on their best behavior, not without shouting at them as they funnel into the hallway though. She turns towards Izuku as they pass by and gives him an apologetic smile. Sorry, Midoriya. It's okay. I don't think anyone will mind, he returns the expression before following suit. However, he does try to linger behind to avoid the coming interaction as much as possible. In doing so, he's joined by a blonde with horns protruding from her golden locks. Hi, I'm Pony. Sorry if my Japanese bad. From America, she speaks in a broken dialectic and a strong accent, but Izuku manages to comprehend her words enough. Hello, Pony, it's nice to meet you. He forgets about honorifics and traditional greetings when she holds out her hand to shake, and don't worry, your Japanese is just fine. Oh, good. At that, she clasps her other hand over his while still hanging on. Izuku becomes flustered and looks around when he realizes she has no intention of letting go. I wanted to say I were bullied because my quirk too, but his panic settles when she gestures with the horns atop her head and she says, I understand. He gives her hands a squeeze to show he comprehends her meaning and nods. Sure, thanks. Monoma stops when he notices the two lagging behind and shouts over his shoulder, hey. Don't be getting all cuddly with a member of 1A just because you feel sorry for him. Pony lets Izuku go and they quicken their pace to catch up as he continues his rant. We're still going to be competing against each other in the festival. Kendo fixes him with a glare to cease the tirade. Leave them alone, Monoma. And the rest of the journey to Class 1A goes relatively smoothly from there. It's a short walk, after all. When they arrive, they discover that the other classes beat them to their destination. It seems Katsuki and a few others are already having a heated encounter with the other courses. Among the sea of students, Izuku spots Gen Ed and business mingling around the support department. At the head of the herd stands a purple-haired boy, his voice tired but still carrying over the crowd. Gotta say, I'm a little disillusioned if this is what you're offering. The sunken eyebags carry a weight like his words as he continues. There's a lot of us who didn't make the hero course and got stuck in general studies or other departments. However, depending on the results of the sports festival, did you know we could get transferred classes? It's my understanding a student dropped out and left a spot available in your class. Consider this a declaration of war to claim that open position. The student's in his way part for him to pass through until he reaches Izuku. He's taller, eyes aimed downwards like Izuku is a pebble in his path. It's a stare that Izuku is familiar with. The boy shoulder decks Izuku and carries on after their brief moment of locking eyes. But Izuku turns and watches the boy leave even after that. If this whole controversy taught him anything, it's that he'll have to earn his place in the hero course. Boiling blood sloshes to the surface, burning, but not quite as bad as the aching pain in his stomach. A harsh pounding contracts his heartbeat with his body, that same strong slam in his head. Izuku can't resist the intense force anymore, he can't remain upright. He lands on all fours. The boy reaches up to cover his mouth just as fast, squeezing his eyes shut as he gags on the pain. Even crouched over a toilet, with the sturdy structure to keep himself braced, he sways side to side. Izuku's eyes shoot open and he pulls his hand back just in time as he vomits. Puke-excelling stomach acid is streaked through with a darker shade of crimson. He coughs, sputtering, and wipes his mouth on the back of his hand. An aftershock, a dry heave, leaves a thin line of sticky blood dripping from his mouth to the ground. Izuku has to spit to get the metallic taste out of his mouth. Every day as the sports festival drew nearer, Izuku's bloody coughs became increasingly more violent as they have become more frequent. If it weren't for the hereditary condition of his mother, it could have been dismissed as a nervous sickness. Minus the copious amount of blood that comes with those fits of regurgitation. Nevertheless, he passed it off as such to his mom and teachers as an excuse to rough it out in the restroom. The bathroom stall becomes claustrophobic when he thinks about one of them walking in and discovering the truth. The effectiveness of that feeling increases when he hears the squeak of the restroom door as an indication of somebody entering. Which, of course, is soon followed by the slaps of shoes against bathroom tile. Izuku stiffens, his body tensing to the point that he can feel his own pulse palpitating. It doesn't help that he begins to hold his breath when the footsteps draw closer to his stall. When the feet stop right outside his door, he can see the blue sweatpants and matching uniform sneakers that belong to UA's gym outfits. A ragged exhale gives away his position, but he doesn't quite care if it's just a member of his class that he's in the presence of. Before he can wonder which of his peers shares his company, the fellow hero student asks with a familiar voice, Midoriya. Todoroki. Izuku tilts his head away from the toilet just enough to take another glance behind himself. Through the slither of the door frame, sure enough, he recognizes his classmate's unique split hair pattern. And if Izuku is not mistaken, Todoroki's usually stoic expression appears mildly concerned. What are you doing here? Izuku's own face twists and scrunches as he tries to decipher the meaning behind his classmate's presence. Considering Todoroki didn't go into the stall beside him, use a urinal or wash his hands, he can only assume. I came to check on you. Izuku does a double take when he hears Todoroki audibly confirm his assumption. As though Todoroki can somehow see that reaction despite the barrier between them, the boy awkwardly explains himself, "You've been gone a while, and the festival is about to start soon." Todoroki shifts his weight, feet shuffling ever so slightly in a strange sort of nervous fidget. Even if Izuku closes his eyes not to see, he can still hear the other boy's shoes squeaking. Aizawa-sensei sent you. Izuku tries to think of the most rational reason as to why Todoroki would bother to care. He keeps his eyes closed, trying to make the dark void of his mind less suffocating than the bathroom stall he's in. There's a delay before Todoroki's response that fools Izuku into thinking the boy left him alone. No, I was personally concerned, but the eventual reply shocks him enough to make his eyes snap open. Back in the festival stadium's bathroom, his gaze is drawn back in the direction of his competitor for the day. There was something I wanted to talk to you about before the first tournament. Todoroki's voice draws Izuku's ear next. Izuku pushes himself up before he flushes the toilet. When he opens the stall door, Todoroki seems taken aback to be met face to face. Izuku then inquires, "There it is." Todoroki shifts to be straight now that he's seeing Izuku's face. As he had previously, he takes his time to collect his thoughts and formulate his words properly. "You have a powerful quirk, but choose not to use it unless absolutely necessary." There's something in the boy's tone that makes Izuku keen to listen. I can relate. Suddenly, all of their strange encounters prior to now make some sort of sense to Izuku. His eyes widen momentarily when he makes the connection of their quirks, but he quickly recomposes himself to match Todoroki's mellow attitude. "You're fire. Right." He treads carefully just in case he made a mistake with his assumption. Todoroki's eyes narrow, a glare directed at nobody in particular shining through his heterochromic gaze. "My father's fire." The low growl is also a switch in tone that Izuku isn't expecting. "Don't let it be misconstrued. I still have my mother's ice and that alone will be enough, which is why I'm stronger than you." There's suddenly a thick tension in the air that wasn't there previously. Huh. Izuku doesn't bother hiding his broadened eyes this time. The statement that just came out of Todoroki's mouth was firm enough to sound as though it had come from a senior. Such conviction coming out of nowhere unsettles him. "I'm more capable." Todoroki reaffirms his bold proclamation. The hand he uses to create ice forms a fist that appears to be holding determination as he declares, "I will beat you." Izuku has to blink back his surprise. Maybe some tears as well. And here he had believed for a second that someone actually cared enough to relate to him and his quirk. He makes a sound. Something along the lines of a scoff. A declaration of war. Izuku shakes his head and sighs, "You're not the first." When his initial disappointment dissipates, he forces a smile and looks Todoroki in the eye. "I can't pretend I understand completely why you felt the need to single me out in particular, but I think I get it enough." Mimicking Todoroki to an extent, he makes his own fist and slams it against his chest. "If you don't need your fire to win, then I don't need my chainsaws." Izuku doubles over, blood spurting out of his mouth as he coughs uncontrollably. The burning sensation in his chest returns, the internal heat spreading towards his stomach. He had thought he got that out of his system. Apparently he thought wrong. Todoroki takes a tentative step forwards, his hands at his sides twitching. "Are you okay?" He lingers while trying to figure out what to do. When Izuku glances up at him, Todoroki actually appears concerned as he had earlier. "I'm fine." Izuku waves a dismissive hand for Todoroki to step aside before using the back of that hand to wipe his mouth. He staggers to the sink before running cold water. After Izuku splashes some on his face to cool off, he looks over his shoulder at his loitering classmate and says, "I'll be out in a minute," and then adds a little quieter, "Thanks for checking on me." Todoroki opens his mouth, closes it, and then reopens to reply, "If you say so." Izuku waits until after Todoroki has left to turn off the faucet and pull some paper towels to dry off. He waits roughly another minute after that, counting the seconds down in his head, to pull out his cell phone and call his mom. The dial tone makes him worry that he waited too long to do so until the line clicks over when she answers. "Izuku, I thought you would be starting by now." Not that I'm complaining to be hearing from you. Her voice sounds chipper and energetic enough that nobody would ever guess her bloody coughs had intensified as well. I told you that I would call before any matches began. He tries to match her upbeat mood as best as he can. He's well aware by now that she's probably acting just as much as he is not to worry him, but if she can see through his facade the same as he can hers, neither of them point it out to the other. Do you think you'll be able to watch the first half of the festival, at least? Of course, I wouldn't miss it for the world, especially with my baby boy competing. Inko doesn't hesitate or pause like Todoroki had. Not in the slightest does she waver or ponder her answer. Izuku whines and blushes from embarrassment but can't resist a goofy smile. The burning sensation that had been in his chest becomes a soothing warmth to his heart. The room I'm in comes with a television, so don't worry, I won't miss a thing. Izuku's smile fades at the reminder that his mom is currently in a hospital bed. Despite his mother's high spirits, he knows that her reason for being there is serious. Did the doctors tell you anything new yet? The hold on his phone tightens as he presses it closer to his ear. Unlike his coughing fits, his mother had hers far longer. A cause for concern became much more pressing as of late. I'm afraid not. Inko's answer lowers Izuku's spirits even further. They took their tests and the surgery is still scheduled for tonight though. He nods. Okay, well, remember to text me if you learn anything new. I can still look at my phone in between matches and stuff. Izuku tries to maintain an encouraging tone but catches a glimpse of his downtrodden demeanor in the reflection of the bathroom mirror. I know, sweetheart, I won't forget. Inko's consoling response tells him that she can somehow see the same thing without even being there. A brief beat passes before she tries cheering him up. Oh, but enough about me, you have to worry about winning too. Her change in attitude is enough to get a small smile out of her son. Oh, I dunno, it's a tough competition. Izuku chuckles at the thought of competing against Katsuki without his quirk. Not to mention Todoroki's challenge and the boy from Gen Ed whose quirk is a mystery to him. And you've got a tough quirk just like the rest. Inko's retort surprises her son so much that he nearly loses his grip on his phone. He manages to catch it and hold it back up to his ear, his mother listening to the fumbling all the while. If my class wasn't ready to see it yet, I don't think the world is ready yet either. He can feel the heat increasing in his chest again and clutches the spot where it burns most. Pokita's tail rests in his palm through the fabric of his PE jacket. There are plenty of heroes who get critiqued because of their appearance, like Gangorka. Don't let it limit your potential. Izuku listens to his mom's voice over the line and can't come up with any retort to her logic. He can almost hear the smug smile in her tone. Izuku lowers his hand to look at it. My potential, huh? Todoroki had said something similar. He wonders if his ability truly is ripe for the taking. When he coughs and a splatter of blood specks land on his open hand, he stops thinking about it in favor of wiping the mess off on his pants leg. Was that a cough? I told you to get checked with me while I'm here. Izuku can hear his mom's concern loud and clear through the phone. He has to hold it a relative distance away. I'm fine, Mom, just clearing my throat. He feigns another cough in an effort to sound convincing before scrambling for a way to hang up. I have to go now anyways, we're about to start. That seems to do the trick well enough. Inko's startled response forgetting his cough. Oh, okay, good luck. Love you, she returns to her bright and bubbly attitude. Love you too, Izuku speaks with a smile in his own tone before hanging up. Then, he enters the fray of the sports festival. Streets stained red are paths walked only by the dead. Blood as dark as the asphalt seeps through his gaping wounds. The crimson liquid runs down his arms as fast as his legs run down the road. He moves in and out of pools of light created by street lamps, the rising sun's slight glimmer making him scared of being left in the dark but also terrified of being seen by what's chasing him if he goes into the light. His arms are wrapped around his guts like he's holding them in. He's so beat, he very well could be. His steel-plated feet scrape the pavement before catching the curb of a sidewalk. He flies forward, going airborne. Then, he lands face first in a bloody heap. It's not the first time that he's fallen. However, it is the first time that he's been unable to get back up. All his body covered in purple welts can manage is a jerky movement that gets him to roll over onto his back. No pale moonlight, not a single star in the sky, offers a glimmer of hope. Just a bare blue like his hair matches his face now. He stares up but closes his eyes. The pitch-black void that dares him to blink forces his eyes to reopen and strain to see through cracked bifocals. The darkness tells him to give in to temptation. To just close his eyes. His eyelids are so heavy and the dawn so dark that he mistakenly believes that he does, just for a fleeting second. Trembling fingers reach into his left pants pocket, straining to grab his cell phone. Blood dots the screen when he does manage to pull it out. He doesn't bother trying to wipe it clean with his sleeve, considering that's just as blood-soaked. Instead, he taps and scrolls through his very few contacts, trying to find the one person he wishes to talk to in the end. He accepts his fate and prepares to say goodbye. He suddenly realizes how eerily quiet the still and seemingly empty street is. The only sound to be heard is the rings his phone makes as he waits for who he's calling to answer. Each ring is so drawn out, it almost matches his long intakes of air. The wait is excruciating. He no longer feels like he's waiting for somebody to answer his call. He starts to feel like the only one who he's waiting for anymore is death incarnate. When the line clicks instead of beeping and going to voicemail, his breath catches in his throat. He tries to choke back a sob of relief when he hears a familiar voice answer, "Hello." Steeling himself, sniffling only a little as he holds back his tears, he presses the phone closer to his face. "Hi, Tenya." The 30-year-old man's voice wobbles just as much as his hand holding the weight of his phone. "It's me. Your big bro." Tensei, the very concerned younger sibling, fumbles with his own phone when he recognizes his brother's voice. Once the rustling ceases, he asks, "Are you all right?" The wounded man smiles to himself, a soft weak one that's much too small to be seen by anyone in the dim morning. Yeah. He's so happy just to hear his brother's affectionate tone one final time, that he doesn't consider the answer a lie. The pressure on his sides becomes too much for him to handle, forcing out a horrendous cough. Spittle dribbles down Tensei's chin, but he's unable to lift his other arm in order to wipe it away. As much pain as he's in, he's just relieved to have this one last conversation with his little brother. "Yeah, Tenya, I'm fine." He doesn't want Tenya to worry about that nasty cough though. "You sound terrible," but Tenya won't let him off the hook that easily. The Ingenium family had always been an overprotective bunch. If only his brother could see him now, he'd throw a fit. Fortunately, Tenya mistakes his cough for anything other than a beating. "Are you coming down with something?" "No," is Tensei's immediate response. After all, he truly isn't sick. But then he reconsiders the alternative of telling his brother the truth. Maybe. He nibbles his bottom lip, trying to decide what it is he should say. He doesn't want to lie, but he doesn't want Tenya to worry either. He just wants to hear his brother's voice one last time. "I dunno. I'm just tired. That's all." He settles on letting Tenya know that much, at the very least. He is tired. And then he tries changing the subject to divert Tenya's attention from fretting over his well-being. "I wanted to see how you were. What with the big sports festival coming up and all." Tenya hums from the other end of the line, wanting to ask more about Tensei's health. After careful consideration, he decides to spare his older sibling the interrogation and settles on praise instead. "You're so kind. Always looking out for everybody else. Even when you yourself aren't feeling well. That's my heroic brother." Tenya's tender tone is full of pride when it comes to the brother that he's always idolized. He switches to something a little sterner for the last part though. "You'd better remember to get some rest though. Don't overdo it." Tensei has to force himself not to laugh at Tenya's antics. He's pretty sure his body wouldn't be able to handle it. Right. He trails off as his smile diminishes. The tears that he's been fighting to hold back begin seeping out of his eyes from the edges. "Listen, Tenya." His voice is just as watery that he has to pause before trying again. "Tenya." Tenya picks up on the way that his brother sounds. So fragile. So already broken. "Tensei," he asks for him out of the fear that he may not be there to answer anymore. Tensei's tears spill out from the corners of his eyes, blending with the blood that's already on his cheeks. "You know I love you. Right?" He feels more pain in his heart than his body when he realizes there's no way to express the amount of love he has for his brother. "I get busy sometimes and forget to say it, but I never forget to think it. Even with everything else running through my head, you're always there too. I need you to know that." Tenya had always looked up to Tensei as the hero Ingenium. Always business as a priority, the well-being of the community. Sometimes, Tensei forgot to be there as an older brother, he worries. In his final moments, he realizes he wasn't able to save his family or himself because of his priorities. Tensei, Tenya raises his voice as high as the level of concern for his brother. He's not sure what's brought on this emotional speech, or why he and Tensei are crying so much right now, but it doesn't feel like a very good reason. His lips quiver as he tries to formulate the proper words to respond to him with, I. But he never gets the chance to say them. Tensei sees something that Tenya does not. So he cuts his brother off to say first, I have to go now, hesitation making him stutter only momentarily. Tensei, wait, his little brother makes it harder for him to hang up. There's a desperation in Tenya's tone that pleads for him not to go. But he can't let Tenya hear what's about to happen. Take care of yourself, Tenya, he ends the call so that he won't have to. Then, it's just him and the one who had been chasing him. Tensei drops his phone, the screen cracking on impact with the pavement as it bounces twice. He figures he won't need it anymore anyway. The hero's metallic heels slide on the concrete, feet pressing in and grinding into the ground. His legs wobble, thin things ready to snap at the bone. However, with the help of his hands, he's able to force himself to stand. Beneath him is a puddle of blood, marking the place of his final stand. Ingenium will run from this fight no longer. Tensei pants heavily, body hunching over more than the man who is currently looming over him. He raises his arms, fingers curling to make his hands into clenched fists. The last time he took on a defensive stance like this, it hadn't been as pathetic. Even so, even if he gets beaten down like he did back then, he'll fight to the bitter end. Quote. Just so you know, he addresses the slender silhouette that's finally caught up to him with as much feigned bravado as he can muster, I won't go down easy. Tattered cloth hangs from the frightening figure, part of it billowing in the wind like a blood-red scarf. In the man's hand is a sword as slender as he, the blade stained with ichor. Towering over Ingenium, the being creates a grim reaper visage, the katana substituting for a scythe. Without a nose, his face could easily be mistaken for a skull. Tensei glares at the man who had been chasing him with defiance. His shaking fists hold still. He finds his resolve and faces death head-on. Death stares back, impressed with the hero's conviction, and responds with a toothy grin that stretches ear to ear. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.